It's so over. We're done. No, we're back. Back to 1938. Again, and again, and again, forever, and ever, until we're all dead, in which point our grandchildren, their grandchildren, and their grandchildren will all be living in 1938 forever again. And
it's like
again.
The worst kind of Groundhog Day.
Time is a flat circle, Josh.
Was that Nietzsche?
And in that circle is a tiny little swastika that is always going to try and leap out unless you, the daring Churchill, decide to swat away the Neville Chamberlains of the world, at which point you'll be able to slam back down that swastika. And I don't know where this analogy is going anymore, gentlemen. Basically, I hate the fact that everything is World War II constantly, all of the time. We're facing new Hitlers every single day. We have got new Churchills or new wannabe Churchills every single day. And I'm bored of this frame of reference because it has been used endlessly to just try to propagandize people into having endless wars for pointless causes and lost causes. In the case of the one that we're talking about today, that being Ukraine.
Everyone's Hitler. Putin's Hitler. Nigel is Hitler. Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall's Hitler. Ainsley Harriot's Hitler.
Alice Weedle in the AFD, she's Hitler now.
Obviously, Trump is. Yeah.
Famously, Hitler was a lesbian Zionist.
Sure.
In these people's frame of mind, it seems.
Sure.
But I tell you what isn't a bad thing that I'm annoyed about. This Islander. Buy it. It's brand new and available on the website. You can't get Islander 2 anymore. And there was some trouble with some of you getting Islander 2 in the first place, but we've solved that this time, thankfully, so you shouldn't have to worry. It's got wonderful articles from people like Benjamin Swizduk, Connor Tomlinson, Callum Darroch, Luca Johnson, Carl Benjamin, and Dr. Nima Parveen, many more. It's wonderful, it's excellent, it feels lovely. I'm going to give it a cuddle after this podcast is done. And you can buy them on the website for $14.99. Anyway, on to the news that I was talking about. So let's just go through some of the updates that have been going on with Ukraine, Russia at the moment. And there is a lot of negotiations going on. I believe that Keir Starmer, if he hasn't already, will be meeting up with Trump today. And that is what some of the negotiations are going to be based around. And where one of the main articles that I'm going to be looking at is focused on as well. Because our old pal, William Hague, everybody's favourite Tory, has some encouraging words of advice for Keir Starmer on how he's going to pull Trump away from the brink of peace and get him back onto the warpath.
But that makes peace sound bad. I didn't realise peace was scary, Harry.
The British and Western establishment, when it comes to Russia in particular, despise peace. They hate peace. They don't like peace. They want you and your family to go and die for the sake of no peace.
So just to get that clear, peace is bad, but war is good.
Yes.
All number 10 is saying is give war a chance.
Yeah. It's a beautiful message. It's a beautiful message.
Anti-John Lennon here.
Really. So obviously when they meet up today, it's going to be the number one item is Ukraine. And there's been some statements made about it, which is that the annexed Ukrainian territory, which I believe is about 15% of Ukraine's total landmass, which has been annexed by Russia, is completely non-negotiable. They've taken about 5 Ukrainian regions, and they're saying, well, we're not giving them back.
That's not how negotiations work. And I imagine that all of this is posturing.
Yes.
And when eventually Ukraine inevitably surrenders some territory to Russia, they're going to be like, well, I said that they shouldn't surrender anything, so it's not my fault. I think that that's part of it, because
it might be
realistically they're not actually thinking that that's a feasible outcome for Russia, are they?
Potentially, but still at the same time, yeah, Russia is won. I don't know if you could make any kind of argument to Ukraine being able to make any kind of credible comeback in the conflict at the moment without actively involving other European nations on the ground.
I mean, Ukraine has not been fully invaded, so they've done well to get that far. They've still got a country, which is not nothing.
Yep.
I think politically it is a bit difficult, because I've heard Zelensky say, and I don't think he's lying, that he's not allowed, like he's constitutionally not allowed to accept that loss of land. So whether Ukraine will have to change government or they'll have to change something in the letter of the law of their constitution or something. Because if the Kremlin just simply won't budge, which they won't, right? They just simply won't. So that's their sort of immovable object. Then, and Ukraine's got something similar, politically speaking. Then someone somewhere along the line has got to give, and it will almost certainly have to be the Ukrainian side of the ledger. But if by law the Ukrainian president, whoever that might be, or their government is not allowed to do it, then there'll have to be some sort of workaround. I mean, I'm kind of stating the obvious there, but how it'll actually play out, how they'll do it, I don't really know.
I think what's going to happen is Zelensky's going to step down, and there's going to be some sort of election about then there might be a ceasefire. Zelensky steps down, they elect someone else that then has some sort of backing to negotiate a peace.
Right.
I would guess that would be the way it would go.
They just might have to amend their actual constitution, as I understand it. Anyway.
It might just have to bypass a law.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the US. It happens all the time.
Realpolitik, or just reality, has to take precedent over any bit of paper, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really.
And Josh is right. You can always find a friendly judge to say, I guess it's legal.
Right. Yeah.
Before the war, everyone was talking about how corrupt Ukraine was. I'm sure if enough people want something done and there's enough money changing hands, anything is possible.
Yeah, and this is all on the US side as well, because they're brokering a mineral deal with Ukraine at the moment as well. And Boris Johnson's all in on that. Boris Johnson, one of the men who was one of the architects of keeping the conflict going to the point where it's got right now. Now that Ukraine is going to have to potentially, as well as giving up a load of its own territory, going to have to give up the rights to the minerals that are on its land. Boris Johnson's like, 2 thumbs up, asset strip that place for all it's worth. Thank you, Boris. What a service you did to the Ukrainian people. You're such a good man. Churchill reincarnated. And the rest of the European establishment don't like to be kept out of this. They don't like that they are not getting much of a place on the table. That's why Keir Starmer's going to meet with Trump today. And that's why a lot of the EU Council, the President Antonio Costa said on Thursday that he had invited Zelensky to a special summit of EU leaders on March the 6th to discuss future support to Ukraine. The EU and its member states are ready to take more responsibility for Europe's security. We should therefore be prepared for a possible European contribution to the security guarantees that will be necessary to ensure a lasting peace in Ukraine. At the same time, Finland has agreed that they are going to pledge 660 million euros in military equipment to Ukraine. And of course, as well, Starmer is going to host Zelensky and the other European leaders at a London summit, because Zelensky is going to meet with Keir Starmer on Sunday. So within Europe, there's a lot of planning going around, because I've mentioned it many times before on this. It seems that the US is less interested in keeping this conflict going on now. They've had the regime change into Donald Trump. He didn't want this sort of conflict going on in the first place. Very famously, he was saying that if he'd been president back in 2022 when this conflict started, it never would have begun in the first place. So he's not interested in continuing to sink resources into it. And in fact, he seems to be very interested in getting as many resources out of it as possible. Now, the Ukraine-US minerals deal is being brokered at the moment. I don't know if it's exactly been signed yet, but there is some information that we know that is available to us. So he's going to meet with Trump on Friday, Zelensky is, to sign an agreement that will give the US access to its deposits of rare earth minerals. Zelensky said that he hoped the preliminary agreement with the US will lead to further deals, but has confirmed no American security guarantees that have been agreed to yet. So if there are security guarantees, it does look like they might have to come from Europe itself in a peace transition period. Trump said that a deal would help American taxpayers get their money back for aid sent to Ukraine throughout the war, but said the responsibility of Kiev's security should fall on Europe, because Donald Trump has said that they sent off $500 billion worth of aid to Ukraine, which I don't know how accurate that is. It's a very, very contested number, but he's trying to get everything that he can.
Yeah, I think he's got his businessman's cap on, isn't he?
Yes.
He's thinking about value for money for a business deal. That seems to be the terms in which he's sort of framing it in. Like, we've given you some money, we want something in return. And I mean, it sounds like they're probably going to get a pretty good deal out of it, that they get minerals that they don't have to pay to defend, because it's going to be European militaries that are protecting Ukraine once there is peace brokered.
Yeah, and
what I gather from what's being discussed, at least.
And here's a nice handy-dandy map where all of this red part are the territory that has been annexed by Russia thus far, and you get some nice views of where all of these mineral deposits are across the rest of the country as well. So obviously Russia has access to quite a bit of it themselves, but there's still plenty for the US to be able, well, for Ukraine to be able to deal with for the US as well.
Got the majority of them there, haven't they?
Yeah, they absolutely do. Also, as part of this these terms, the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal, said that they've finalized a version of the agreement where it envisages an investment fund that will be set up for Ukraine's reconstruction. So this sounds almost like Marshall Plan-esque, where Kiev and Washington will manage a fund on equal terms, and he said that Ukraine will contribute 50% of future proceeds from state-owned mineral resources, oil and gas to the fund, and the fund will then invest in projects in Ukraine itself. The New York Times reported as well that the US, in a draft document, would own the maximum amount of the fund allowed under US law, but not necessarily all of it. So this money, whether it's in a joint fund or not, sounds like majority owned by US, so the US gets to keep a massive level of interest, investment, and influence in Ukraine following this. So Ukraine, if it was under the US's thumb before, still very, very, even more so,
yeah.
Even more so right now. Another vassal state to add to many. And a source in the Ukraine's government told the BBC that the provisions of the deal are much better for Ukraine now, because, of course, I think at first Donald Trump was just like, give us $500 billion. So he played
Dr. Evil.
play hardball on him straight away.
I mean, that was the money that they supposedly gave them, so it's not actually that unreasonable to say, well, give us some money back, but then where are they going to get it from?
Yeah, exactly. And so
half of it never turned up in the first place, right?
That's true, yeah.
yes, there's been a lot of tricky accounting for where a lot of that money went, and I'm sure that a lot of yacht businesses and other style ventures have made a pretty penny.
Lots of chateaux in France, perhaps.
Maybe. But that's the American side of it. On the British and European side, we're still going a little bit crazy about this whole thing with agitprop like this sort of thing that's been coming out in the Times, where they've said Trump can't eat here, where they've got I'm sure a very, very pleasant Ukrainian woman and her very, very pleasant Ukrainian restaurant saying, like, why does this need to be a story?
Yeah.
Why does this need to be in the Times? Why does anybody need to know this? Oh, it's because the British establishment are still wanting to go full bore on this, because they want to be able to say, they want to convince Trump that no, we can take the 15%, we can take that territory back from Russia if you just keep pumping money into it, because we need defense guarantees.
And as if Trump wants to eat in this rinky-dink tin pot end of the pier restaurant, it might be lovely. I've got no idea. But one, as if he wants to,
lovely.
And two, if he insists on it, like she's going to stand up to the Secret Service. Come in mob-handed, 24 Secret Service guys a week ahead of the time saying the president is eating here. She's going to be like, no, don't make me go ballistic on you.
She'll hold a hand out like The Rock, and then she'll just go, just bring it. Just bring it. And then she'll hit him with the rock bottom, and it'll be amazing. Donald Trump won't know what hits him. And then she'll give him a stunner for good measure. No, that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that this doesn't matter at all. I don't actually have any problem with normal Ukrainian people being upset that the war has gone so terribly.
In all honesty, yeah.
Yeah, and
I've got sympathy. I feel sorry for...
And then, of course, you see that, well, it seems like US is trying to expand its influence even more in Ukraine now, and trying to, in a certain asset strip the place.
I have seen opinion polls of Ukrainians, and they do support ending the war. So there's, and it's understandable. Like, I imagine that every family has lost someone, a male in their family from this conflict, because the human cost of it is catastrophic.
Of course.
And so at this point, I think they're just glad to see the end of it.
For my part, I've been vocal since the beginning, or since 2022, that I'm pretty firmly anti the Zelensky government. But I've got loads of sympathy for the average Ukrainian person. Of course, yeah.
They're just psychopathic to not have
right. Yeah,
for.
yeah. The average Ukrainian patriot that just doesn't want their country being invaded. Of course, I've got sympathy for them, but it's just the reality of the Russian army.
You have to take stock and say, unless you are willing to escalate the conflict to who knows.
You had 2 or 3 summers to push them out of that bit of land, and you got billions of dollars of military aid to do it, and you failed. I'm sorry, it's like playing a sports game. You've got the 90 minutes or whatever it is to win or lose, and the final whistle has come and you lost.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's the end of the game, I'm afraid. And it's sad. It's really bitter and sad that you lost, but you lost.
Yeah. But some people want it to keep going. They don't want to accept that it's lost, and they want to, as William Hague does, evoke Churchill to woo Trump.
Oh, everyone's Churchill.
Everybody who's pro-war.
Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, Churchill.
Churchill. As long as you are in favour of a war somewhere, anywhere, that makes you a freedom fighter, that makes you Winston Churchill, greatest Briton to ever live, if you say maybe this war is lost and we need to wind this up, then you're a Neville Chamberlain, which is just a synonym.
Everyone's Neville Chamberlain.
For a coward.
So Empire's back on the menu then? Is that all right? We're bringing back the British Empire?
I don't think he means that part of Churchill. I don't think he means that Churchill. Not the good parts of Churchill.
You're right. It is pathetic and sad and annoying. The endless parallels with Hitler, Chamberlain and Churchill. You remember when Zelensky went over to Congress, a couple of years ago now, and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and a number of others, literally and explicitly a number of times said, he is the Churchill of our age.
Yeah.
Get some new material.
Yeah,
well,
right.
There've been wars. Yeah. There've been wars since then that we don't evoke. I mean, I don't know why you'd want to evoke the Vietnam War in such a way, for instance. But I think it's the fact that it's been presented as the good war means that it can always be used as basically a mind virus to get people to think, well, this will be my good war. This will be my good war. You can't do that with Vietnam. You can't do that with Korea. You can't do that with Afghanistan, because they are all examples of war being bloody and hopeless, and in many cases ultimately pointless, especially when America is the one getting involved in these foreign conflicts. But they can always just point to World War II and see, that was the good one. That was the good one. We did the good things in that one, so we'll do the good things this time, and it won't end up like all the other disasters. We definitely haven't pushed Ukraine into escalating and continuing a war that could have wound up a few months into the initial conflict, losing them thousands and thousands of men, making the women flee as refugees to foreign countries across Europe, and now we're asset stripping the place.
Town shelled into oblivion.
Yeah.
I would argue that all of Europe lost in World War II, right? You know, every country. And if they're drawing parallels to World War II, well, hasn't all of Europe lost here as well? Because we've pumped lots of resources into a country. I understand that there's talk of it potentially coming back to us eventually, in that they were saying that there were loans. Or
I think there's
not necessarily been able to get to the bottom of
discussion whether the money that was given by the US and Europe counted as a grant or a loan. So there's some haggling being done over how much actually needs to be paid back in many cases.
Mm-hmm. But at the minute, it seems like all of Europe is out of pocket, and the US is getting something in return, whereas we're again, on the hook for all of this stuff. It seems like
we want some of that sweet titanium.
Yeah,
we want some of those sweet rare earths.
Give us your minerals, Ukraine. Give us your minerals.
Zelensky,
what's going to happen?
Good God,
Zelensky is like DM, and Putin is like Ho Chi Minh. No, wait. No, that doesn't work.
Oh wait, yeah. You can't really do that one, can you? Who's the Saddam Hussein in this situation?
Yeah, and Saddam's also bad.
Who's George W?
George W is Zelensky, and Saddam is Putin, obviously.
Oh, okay, obviously that makes sense, and that was a good war.
Apparently
so. Apparently ended very, very well for everyone involved, and nobody was a war criminal. Fantastic how that was. I just love that he's trying to evoke Churchill as well, because can't Trump just turn around and say, hey, didn't you just have his portraits removed from Parliament? Mm-hmm. So the actual messaging that's going on here is completely contradictory and doesn't seem to have any internal consistency.
Well, the portrait of Wellington was replaced by Yvette Cooper, so she's really
cult portrait. Yeah,
she's really the real Churchill, isn't she?
I mean, aren't
lady.
we all? Maybe the Churchill was within us all along. As soon as I decided to start a war.
Yeah, when I open a bottle of whiskey, maybe.
And the interesting thing is that a few months back, following the Martyr Maid controversy, we actually had a discussion on this subject, a roundtable where we had the Churchill question. And I thought it was a really interesting and productive conversation. And the point that I made that I think still stands and is being shown to be correct over and over again is no matter the true historical context of it, the narrative that has been built up is always used to justify these wars. And Stelios mentioned at the time, and this was a fair point, that in terms of realpolitik, if they want the wars, they'll have the wars. They'll come up with a different narrative. And that's true to an extent, yes. But I do also think that on a leader like Boris Johnson, and in the minds of these leaders, it works as a motivator for themselves because they can see themselves as shrouding in that glory that's been put onto Winston Churchill.
They're appealing to a mythology of modern Britain, aren't they? They're trying, it also is so all-encompassing in Britain that it trickles out to other countries as well. You're saying about how Nancy Pelosi and the likes were referring to him as Zelensky as a Churchillian figure, and I think that because it's been so mythologized and they've painted Churchill as this flawless, heroic figure who stood up to the pesky Germans, then it's painting yourself in a veneer that is unearned, I think, as well.
Well, they both rejected peace overtures a number of times, so there is that parallel.
You could make a kind of joke that if Keir Starmer did pointlessly escalate a war into an enormous continental conflict in Europe, that would be the most Churchillian thing of him to do. But I wouldn't make that joke. I wouldn't say such a thing, because such a thing would be anti-patriotic of me. Anyway, but it's that the spectre of the 1930s German government looms over not just wars, but it looms over all politics and is a driving motivator for why we live in the world that we do. It's called the post-war consensus. And the absolutely hysterical tone that is drawn up amazes me sometimes. You think that you've seen it all, and then you see an article in the Telegraph like this, talking about the recent German elections from over the weekend, saying to be optimistic about Merz, but the spectre of the 1930s remains. Now, I'll just read a few excerpts from this and tell me if this sounds like a reasonable interpretation of a country which has been absolutely beset and humiliated by mass migration, all of the foreigners coming in, abusing their people, causing all sorts of trouble.
And just multiculturalism in general for decade upon decade.
In general, a country like that may be sliding towards a more anti-immigrant party who has managed to get, 20% in the votes recently?
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. So here you go. Germany cannot face the risk of being led by charlatans who would betray civilization to its enemies. Great start. When Germany surrendered unconditionally in 1945, great start to the article there, okay? Almost everyone assumed that the Nazis would be a threat for many years to come. Even in 1949, the first Secretary General of NATO, Lord Ismay, summed up its purpose as to keep the Soviet Union out, the Americans in, and the Germans down. But the Nazi revival never happened. For 75 years, the Federal Republic was conspicuous as Europe's most successful economy and an exemplary civil society, giving the lie to Spenglerian prophecies of doom. Until now. Until now. Spengler re-emerged. Somehow Spengler returned. We're so back. Sunday's election saw the first serious threat to German democracy emerge since the defeat of the Third Reich. That threat goes by the name of Alternative for Germany. Dun dun dun. Dun dun dun. Since the invasion of Ukraine 3 years ago, the AfD have been the dominant party in the former East Germany, but now they are the most popular choice for younger voters right across the country. For now, the oldies have saved German democracy. Still, if this trend, they've sold out their own children, their grandchildren, their safety and well-being, but no, they've saved an abstract concept of democracy. Thank God.
Guaranteeing many more rapes. Yeah, brilliant.
Yep. This is a party that tells Germans that they have been enslaved since 1945 by a guilt cult imposed by the Allies. Quite literally true.
Yeah. That's a statement of fact.
That was what denazification was, okay? They quibble over how many of the SS should be seen as war criminals, or whether the Holocaust was just a speck of bird S on their nation's otherwise spotless history. The AFD is so openly pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian, and authoritarian that even Marine Le Pen and Giorgia Meloni will have nothing to do with them. The AFD's leader, Alice Weidel, is not just a Leni Riefenstahl fantasy version of Nigel Farage. So they are the second coming of Hitler. Alice Weidel's going to grow herself a little mustache. It'll be incredible. No one will ever have seen anything like it. It'll be terrific. And they're going to, I assume, do bad things. Do very bad things.
Annex Austria.
Annex Austria.
The Sudetenland, the Rhineland.
Well, can you guess what the forward
Western
thinks that they're going to do?
Invade Poland?
Oh, blimey.
Of all of the publications out there, the insane socialist communist Daily Forward is one of my favorites because they are absolutely bonkers. They are absolutely mad and publish some really ridiculous stuff. Alice Weidel, who is a Zionist and has said explicitly in her interview recently with Elon Musk that she is all in on support for Israel. Apparently,
That's the head of AFD.
That's the head of the AFD, has apparently going to cause the second coming of Hitler.
It's always those who you least expect.
I know. I know. It's absolutely ridiculous, but I would read a bit of this, but I don't want to get in trouble. So I hate the framing of the Second World War, and I would like to ask our leaders very politely, please, can we move out of 1938 and into a different era? That would be very nice. Thank you very much.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.